You guys sit here, closer. Mind I take the outside?
I don't mind at all.
We'll take the,
You take here?
yeah, perfect.
Oh, we need train.
Here, I got it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Very thoughtful.
Is that in frame?
Yeah, we're all in frame, right?
Where's the frame?
Tray's on frame, right?
Okay. So good to go, all right. Hey everybody, welcome to SUBDRIVE Sessions. My name is Ricardo Galvez. I am the founder of SUBDRIVE. Thanks to Blender Workspace for hosting us tonight. Sorry for starting a little bit late, but we're going to be amplifying our voices. We don't have microphones. So if you don't hear us, let us know. I want to welcome our guests, Owen Grover and Daniel Casanova. Can you introduce yourselves and tell us a little about what you guys do?
Hi, Owen Grover, and I've been at iHEARTMEDIA for almost 12 years, focused on the digital part of the business. I also helped build out the events business at iHeart, and my claim to fame there is I'm one of the co-creators of the iHeartRadio app, for which the company is now named.
Nice. I'm Daniel Casanova. I'm the creative director at E4 TV. We are we call ourselves the global music festival television network. And we just basically go around the world. We live stream music festivals and we do original content there, which is a little bit more of my domain. But the live streaming has really become quite a passion for us of mine.
Awesome. So how did you guys get into the business that you're in right now? What was the path that you followed?
It's such a weird path. I started when I was working at TBT Records in mid-2000s. I know, right? Back in the day. And I had a friend that I met at a show who turned out to be the editor of Spin.com, which was Spin's website. And he used to do all their interviews, and he hated being on camera. And my previous job, I was the resident DJ at the Virgin Records in Times Square. A lot of record releases there, and they just started asking me, like, hey, can you interview 50 Cent? I'm like, okay. Hey, interview Snoop Dogg. I'm like, all right. So I started doing live interviews there. And a mutual friend of ours that had also worked at Virgin told him, get Casanova to do it. So I started doing interviews for Spin.com in mid-2000s. And when Euphoric was starting up, they saw some of those old interviews. And the same situation, the guy that was doing it started the company and hated being on camera. And saw mine. Weird road.
He's got a better story than I do. I played in bands as a kid. I always wanted to be in and around music, and I had no idea how to do that, how to make that happen, because I didn't have an uncle in the business, I didn't have a brother or a father, and I didn't have all these great connections. So this is going to sound hopelessly antiquated, but I answered a help wanted ad in the New York Times. I lived in Portland, Oregon for a year, moved back to the city in the mid-90s, and I answered a Times help wanted ad and worked for about 2 years for a music production company. During that time, this was a Japanese artist that we worked with. One of his biggest fans gifted him a website, made a website for him. This is like 96, 97, very, very early on.
That's so Japanese.
So Japanese. and it was kawaii, and it was like super cute. It was not pictures, it was all like little cute animations and the whole thing. And I had to learn how to manage and update and build additional pages. And as soon as I realized that there was this place where music and technology were going to meet, I was like, that's it. That's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
That's great.
There are other parts of that story.
It's always a weird road.
I'll tell you what, I bought so much music from that stupid Virgin Records.
Well, you know what?
I worked at Bertelsmann, it was right upstairs.
I answered an ad in the back of the Village Voice.
There you go.
Now hiring all positions. And I
Village
went
Voice.
in and I gave him a mixtape.
He even has a cooler newspaper than I did. At the time, this is the voice.
So back then, we're talking about physical media. People would have to go to shows. The only way that you were able to see these broadcasts was by like watching on TV, right? Like Live Aid in the 80s.
Palladium was another.
Yeah, so Palladium is later. Yeah, Palladium is much later. I mean, the irony of all this is, of course, I grew up watching MTV. I remember coming back from summer camp in the early 80s, and my older brother was like, check this out. He sat me down, and U2's video for Gloria was playing.
Wow.
That's how far back.
Wow.
I'm way older than I look. I was just hooked. And so ironically, about 5 years into my stint at what was then called Clear Channel, after we had actually launched the earliest version of iHeartMedia, a guy came to run our division. His name was Bob Pittman. And he had made an investment in the company, and he'd been hired ostensibly to help us with the digital strategy. He wound up becoming the CEO of the company in short order. Founder of MTV.
Wow.
And then I worked for his lieutenant, a guy called John Sykes, building out the event strategy inside the company. And Sykes was on the launch team and ran VH1 for years and years during the time that Storytellers and Divas and
Storytellers was such a
all
great
of that
series.
stuff. Exactly. So the irony of that question, as I saw that question when you wrote it down, was I got to work and get to work really closely with these guys who developed that platform, which sort of presages so much of the stuff that we work on now. In my case, literally.
Well, I mean that's what we grew up on, so that's what we're just in our own way emulating.
Absolutely.
So do you think now that everyone has, with the younger generation, it's kind of like, oh, I can just literally go on YouTube, I can go on Facebook and watch anything I want. Literally, people are streaming.
Not music on Facebook. Don't
Yeah.
try to put music on Facebook. You'll get a hand slap. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, so like with all the platforms now, how do you guys, plan, how do you strategize content production? Because you guys work on Snapchat.
Sure.
You have the Xbox app that you guys are going to work on. How's the strategy behind those things?
We're just trying to do our own thing, which even early on when we first started putting out our content, it was three people. I had a cameraman who also did my post-production. I did all the pre-production and the on-camera, so the interview, and then the CEO was the guy who was out there running around selling. But basically from working in nightlife in New York for 10, 12 years, I had a lot of connections, and the CEO had been doing music activations for 10, 12 years, so we had a lot of festival connections. So we were able, as like a fledgling little network, to go and get interviews with really big artists at really big music festivals. So people kind of started to take note of what we were doing, and I really wanted the interviews to be different. Like having done the interviews that we did for Spin back in the day was, I remember we would shoot, and then the poor guy that did the camera work and the post-production never made it to the festival, never once. We would shoot usually off-site, and then he would just be rendering video all night long to get it up as soon as possible, because it was all about, we're at Coachella, this is what's happening right now today. So a lot of the things that we were talking about in the interviews were, what are you doing now? Where are you going on tour? Blah, 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 blah. Who are you working with on your album? It was all very in the moment, because it was designed to be up as soon as possible and then irrelevant in a week.
Okay.
So we're trying to produce something that's more entertaining and more informative, that you could watch tomorrow or you could watch next year, and still holds quality and has a little bit of that artist's personality, not just their here and now, but we try to get a little bit deeper. So I think that kind of stands out among some of the content, at least that I've seen.
Yeah, for us, we look at it in terms of, so what's the use case, right? So we started, when I first joined the company in 2005, one of the first things I was handed was an agreement to get artists and labels to sign off on a closed set video series that we were doing. My boss at the time had been in AOL. They had done Sessions. Sessions was loosely based on storytellers, right? And AOL did one, and Yahoo did one, and back in the sort of Web 1.0 days, right? And we would do these, and we would cut them up, and then later we bought a TriCaster and we started doing them live, right? So it was this notion of creating greater interactivity around radio, stream the station, make this content available exclusively to our radio stations, create a reason for people to engage with their favorite radio station and their favorite personalities off the air, right? Because we knew other people were doing it, and shame on us if we didn't give the listeners, invite them in, give them a reason to follow us into these other places. But the distillation of all this is sort of, at the end of the day, we have this massive radio platform, and the question we're always asking ourselves is, what do the listeners expect from us, right? And sort of, we don't really have a digital strategy per se, we really have more of a brand strategy. It's really simple. be wherever the listeners expect us to be, with all the features and the services and the products that they want from us. We know, I mean, you mentioned Snapchat, we have a Discover channel. Why are we on Snapchat? What does that have to do with radio? What does that have to do with music? What does that have to do with digital? Like, the fact of the matter is we know our listeners use Snapchat. We have the brand permission to engage with them on that platform, right? We also have about 85, 90 million friends, followers, and so on social media. So we know our listeners are getting content from us there and that they're engaged in conversations with our personalities on those platforms. So if we're not feeding them content, right, whether it's on demand or live, right, then shame on us. We also know stuff like Facebook has put a huge, huge focus around live content to the point where they've algorithmically preferenced it. So if you start a live video, you're going to get, all of your followers and your friends are going to get notifications, and they're going to want same thing with Instagram,
yeah.
right? So the fact of the matter is you have to look at these pieces. What are the expectations, and then what are the platforms doing in a way that allows you to ride that wave in a sensible fashion? Now we have our own platform, right? With a set of platforms. But even if you don't, even if you're just an end user, it's like sort of like, or even if you're just an artist, you have that right to have that conversation.
And so you guys individually also have your own platforms. So you're not concerned with sharing your content across the different businesses like Facebook and.
I mean, are you concerned? I mean, obviously Facebook's eating the world. I say that.
And they're holding us
lovingly.
on.
I'm concerned with that on a whole different level.
Yeah, I mean, look, I say that lovingly, but the fact of the matter is, you can't bury your head in the sand.
Yeah.
Snapchat in its own way is just as ruthlessly ambitious in terms of original content, in terms of capturing eyeballs, in terms of just completely owning that youngest demographic. And so what are you going to do? You're going to say, well, we don't like their you've got to find a way to play, right? You've got to, you can't just ignore it and say, well, I don't like the economics, or, I mean, look, I'll give you a perfect example in my world. A lot of radio broadcasters don't like streaming because the traditional model in radio broadcasting, as you know, is you put up a tower in a field and you send out a signal, right? And there's no additional cost. Like if you have 100,000 listeners or you get 1 million listeners, that doesn't cost you any more.
Yeah.
But any time that you're streaming audio, streaming video, every additional user costs you more in bandwidth. It probably costs you more in royalties, right? Depending on, are you doing video that's got music in it, or are you doing audio that's got music in it, or are you paying a sync license? All of these things are absolutely part of the model, right? So some radio broadcasters are like, well, I know my model in terrestrial or broadcast listening. I don't have to pay all these variable costs, so I don't like streaming. But guess what? Then basically what you're doing is you're giving up on your listeners. The listener has already decided, the user's already decided, this is where they're getting their content, right? So you ignore that at your peril.
Yeah.
Do I sound passionate about it? I'm angry.
And you guys, so you're approaching, with Euphoric, you guys are approaching it more like plug and play, right? Like it's not, you're not building a back-end platform. It's
I mean, we have our site, but we are not so obsessed with where people see our content. It's that they see our content. So we've definitely, and we do this with artists too. Like if we do an interview, through friends, the guys in Autograph. Autograph used to be Midnight Conspiracy, who were the residents of our satellite party in Chicago. So I've known those guys. Yeah, they were the residents at Girls and Boys Chicago, like back in the day. So when we did an interview with them, like last year, we were talking before, and they're like, oh, we actually have this new album coming out. We have this tour, blah 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 blah. Like we can't talk about it. I was like, well, we can just hold the interview. Let's do it. Like, if you don't mind, like, letting us do the announce, let's do the announce. So when we did that, we partnered with EDM.com, is making an official announcement of this tour, and we did it right there in the interview. And, people saw that it was from, EDM.com and Euphoric TV. So that helps us. Like, whether they saw it on EDM.com or they saw it on Euphoric TV, it doesn't matter. Yeah. At this point, it's brand recognition for us. Because we're still growing. We're still in, like, very early stages.
And we, ironically, even though we're growing digitally, but as a broadcast entity, we're already very well established. I would say our approach is almost precisely the same. As we think about how we live stream, we're looking at potential partners, right? So we were talking about this earlier. We're doing a branded content play with Albertsons around a new music program that we built, right? We do it on Facebook Live because of the reach, right? But we've done our iHeartRadio Music Festival on multiple platforms. We've live streamed that on Xbox. We've live streamed it through Yahoo, through a media partnership we had with them. And right now we're doing it with the CW. CW is the television broadcaster. They came back to us and they said, for our demo, CW leans very, very young for a TV broadcaster with their shows and with their content and programming. They said having the live stream available exclusively through our CW site and app is actually meaningful for us. So we're thinking about, just like you thought, about EDM.com, we're thinking about, what is the use case? What is the event? Who's the audience?
Right.
What's the platform that makes sense for this? We had a partnership already in place with CW. They wanted to own that experience. So all of these pieces, right? What's the economic model? So, we don't have any kind of religion about the distribution mechanism. In fact, the more distribution partnerships that we build, the better off we feel we'll be.
Absolutely.
And then that leads to another question. Do you guys have preferences sometimes?
Mm-hmm.
With and what I mean by preferences, do you have preferences with the partners that you work with or the platforms that you put your content onto?
Well, as far as the partners, if it's a great experience, if everybody comes out with a positive experience, I'd love to keep working with them. If it's a headache, dealing with, the rigmarole of whatever their organization is, then it's probably best to find somebody else. I don't want to, obviously I'm not going to fill in any of those blanks, but
You know you're talking.
I know who I'm talking about. I'm sure you do too. But no, it's just really as far as the platform. Is it easy to use? Is it accessible? Like you were saying with the CW, I mean, that's your target audience. Boom, you've got the website. Go, run with it. And if it's a great experience to work with them, I mean, why would you not do that again? It's a great fit.
I mean, I think there are two answers that I don't think are contradictory. The first answer I think is user experience, or another way of putting that is what's the best experience for the listener, right? Or what's the expectation, right? So that's the first. But the way of answering it is what are the economics, right? So in the case of Yahoo, when they were ascendant a few years ago and they were rebuilding their organization and they brought the women in from Google and they were investing a lot in original programming, economically that made a lot of sense for us because they were licensing that content directly from us for cash on the barrel. Now, there's nobody in the company who said, well, Yahoo is, the most interesting brand. They just felt like this is a good partner. They're complementary, they don't compete with us, and they're investing in these live streaming experiences. We can be their music partner, and then subsequently they partnered with Live Nation and so on. And even that wasn't necessarily directly competitive with us. But in that case, the economic model worked really well for us, right? I think the people get into trickiness when at the expense of the user experience, they chase the economic model, right? If you think to yourself, I'm just going to take as much money off the table as I can, and then you limit your audience, well, that was a real good short-term decision, but a terrible long-term decision.
And how do you guys view? This live streaming itself has been around for such a long time, in the form of real networks and
Sure.
that, but it's not. It hasn't gotten to the quality that we have now, right? Literally anyone can pick up their phone and live stream something, before you need the equipment that we have. How we're doing this right now. But with that in mind, how are you guys adapting to technological changes like virtual reality or augmented reality? You guys thinking about that road?
I am so excited about virtual reality because so much of music festivals is experiential, and you might see a lineup that's 60% the same, but it is 100% different festival, one to the other. If it's in a different country, even a different state. And if you can bring someone that experience more than just the performance, because the performance, let's be honest, especially if it's an electronic artist at a big music festival, they're probably playing the same set that they're going to play at the next 5 to 6 music festivals they're playing. They've got their set, just wrote, they do it. Bands, more or less the same. They've got a set list, they're going to do their set list. Maybe it changes here and there, but if you've seen it once on that circuit, you've seen it. But the experience of that festival, and that's what I like about our original content, is we do try to get out into the city that's hosting the festival and showcase that city, showcase the food, showcase the architecture, the culture, exactly. Because we've covered festivals in Morocco, in Hong Kong, in Thailand, in Indonesia, and we try to tell those stories. So the festival we did in Indonesia, 80,000 kids at a festival that could be held in LA just as easily. Headliners were Snake and Jack U and Tiesto. I mean, that could be any festival anywhere in the United States, and here you have the largest Muslim country in the world, 80,000 kids, the girls in hijabs just dropping ass like it's their job. It was phenomenal. So it was all about that story of like connecting, like there's this disconnect between these cultures, but this is obviously something that everybody can enjoy. And so it really had a lot to do, not just with what was happening on stage, but turning that camera towards the crowd and getting out into that crowd and seeing them and meeting them. And I was talking to someone earlier too about the idea. I love the idea of being able to have a virtual merch table. You know, God bless these bands. You know, a lot of them don't make a lot of money. A lot of it is from their merch. And if you really want to have that experience, let's move from this stage to that stage. Oh, let's go check out the merch table, and then you're at the festival. You know, and then it really becomes something else. So I'm. Can you tell I'm excited?
You should be.
Virtual reality, I'm very excited about it. We're talking to Nokia and working with them about really doing more VR. But the more accessible it becomes, like all technology, I mean, you can be super excited about whatever, Blu-ray, Laserdisc, until people can afford the equipment to use it, and it becomes widespread. Like you said, everybody has one of those phones. Until everybody can use that phone to consume that type of media, we're not there yet, but bring it on.
So, you know, I agree with everything you said. My concern about the VR right now is, it's like, or maybe my observation is fair to say, is usually you've got to drag partners and brands and sponsors, even sometimes artists and creators, kicking and screaming into the world like we did in digital 15 years ago. Hey, this is something that's worth your while. VR and AR are like nothing I've ever seen, in as much as there's so many artists that are interested, there's so many brands that are already spending money, there's so many partnerships that have unfolded with, you know, the Samsungs, Facebook buying Oculus, Jaunt VR, all these big companies that are extremely well funded, and there is no install base, none. And whatever we think the equipment is now, the HTC Vive, the Oculus Rift, whatever the thing is that's gonna be the thing, whatever's out there right now ain't it.
Right.
It ain't it.
Yeah.
So I don't think we even know yet what this is going to be about. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be this huge bulky thing with a matrix cord coming out of the back of your head. I just
Google
don't,
Glass proved that. It can't be this
for
big bulky
sure.
ass thing.
So I just think it's so strange that we've had conversations with advertisers. What can you build for us in VR? And I go, we can build anything except no people that you want to sell shit to will see any of it.
Right.
And there's just this weird disconnect that I find. I've never seen it before. Like, I've spent my entire adult life in emerging technology and platforms. I've never seen it. And I'm hoping that there can be some way to accelerate it. But these things will happen because users will decide what the killer use cases are, not Samsung, right? Not even Facebook, as brilliant as those guys are. Users are going to decide what the killer app is.
Yeah.
And then I just don't think that that's happening.
No, it definitely hasn't. It definitely hasn't.
So, AR, right? VR makes sense for like the experience aspect. Augmented reality, you know, Snapchat's dipping its toes into it. Facebook, as we all know, is kind of tapping into Snapchat for those things. How do you feel that might tie into events that you guys cover? You know, like.
Same thing. I mean, it has a ton of potential because you can literally do anything. You can do absolutely anything you want to do. I mean, your imagination is the limit to what you can do.
But that's more realistic now. Like AR, because you don't need goggles. You can just stuff it on your phone.
Even AR, like the apps that I've like played around with were really clunky. Like I haven't seen anything yet that's really kind of sold me. I love the idea. But I'm not completely sold on, and like exactly what you just said. People are going to decide what the killer app is. I don't think it's been made. I don't think anyone has really taken it to the point where it needs to be. But once it's there, and we've had Instagram on our phones for a long time, and Instagram Live is brand new. So it might be something that exists already right now, and it just hasn't quite clicked, or they haven't bridged the gap. And when they do, I mean, the whole premise of augmented reality is you can do whatever you could imagine. So once it's there, once the tech guys do their thing, then the imagination people can go and kind of run with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think of, and I'm terrible at doing this. I always say I don't want to try to predict the future, but I think of some really fun things that are easy to do right away, like augmented reality around audio, right? So you go to an event, an artist plays, sends the signal to a pair of in-ear headphones, you get some content or you get some sort of, you're not on drugs, but you're on drugs. Like that sort of experience. So I've seen some of those things. So audio or visual, oral as it were. And I think that stuff is cool. Everything feels slightly gimmicky to me right now, which scares me a little bit. Just back to the point of not knowing where it's going to land. Certainly, the whole idea of filters and pointing your camera at yourself and seeing little creatures appear. It's gimmicky, but it's fun, and I think that there are a lot of creative applications, particularly in your world, for stuff like that. I will say this: advertisers would love to see that little Samsung phone or that, whatever it would be. I'm using Samsung. I hate to pick on them,
right?
But I can't think of anyone else whose phones blow up.
Thankfully,
I'm sorry. So I just, I think that again, in some ways, the behavior is being outpaced, right, by brand interest, which is always a little bit of a warning sign.
There's another level of I don't think it's specifically augmented reality, but it is kind of a different type of experience. It was something that in my last job they had played around with, like there's over Bluetooth you can connect in different areas, different regions of a store, and they can send you direct sale information based on your
location-based services,
exactly,
beaconing.
And that's something that I've been really interested in using at a festival. So if we know that you are a 4 TV watcher and you like watching interviews with Skrillex and David Guetta, we can say, hey, in 15 minutes, DJ Snake is going on at that stage just over to your left.
That's really smart.
It's like that's something that we're interested in, and also like if you can make your schedule like you can do on most festival applications to have that kind of connectivity, saying, hey, this artist for your festival, but you're moving further away from their stage, or hey, you're moving close to a water dispensary, using that kind of technology just to keep people informed or to keep people connected. If you go in part of a group, and you're a group of like 20 and somebody goes missing, you can pinpoint them using that technology. There's a lot of great application for it.
I agree, and the key piece that's to underpin all that is trust.
Yeah.
The user has to trust that you're not going to use that information if you opt in to spam them, to market to them stuff they don't care about, use it in a way that's going to make them feel like you can be. There is no device that we've ever had in our lives that's more personal is more closely connected to us. I mean, think about where guys put their phones in their pants, or it's an incredibly you're putting yourself when you opt into services, you're making yourself vulnerable to third parties, and you don't necessarily know what they're going to do with that information.
Yeah.
And so trust really needs to be at the cornerstone of that. I mean, I think that one of the things that's happened in the space with whether it's VR or AR is that folks like me, which is why you shouldn't listen to folks like me necessarily, have all already said like, oh, I know what's going to happen. You won't be able to go to the concert, but we're going to take you there. And then you look at that direction, you can be up in the balcony, or you can change your camera view, or now you're on stage. Guess what? Nobody cares.
Yeah.
That's going to be the killer app. Everyone's going to love it. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. But we all assumed, I can walk the festival grounds.
Yeah.
I think that that's a lot of, I think probably pretty good guesswork about the use cases, and the data that I've seen and the stuff that we've tried, I just don't see that that's it yet. So we have to do a better job, in my opinion, particularly on the creative and production side, of understanding, okay, what would be a really compelling, interesting experience? Because I'm not sure we're there yet.
And also it's where you do that, because that's not an EDC type of, like that festival that happens 9 times out of 10 in a parking lot somewhere, nobody gives a shit.
That's
It's
right.
in a parking
That's
lot.
right.
But if you can do that
That's right.
at Tomorrowland in Belgium,
Right.
where you can, you say you've got these 360-degree cameras set up at like maybe 20, 30 different places, but there's actual things happening there that you might be interested in seeing, as opposed to, kids in furry boots walking around the parking lot, which does not sound interesting, you know. But where you need a festival that is really experiential and is really high up on their production value and really has something more than just people playing on stage.
So that leads me to two other parts. One, genres, right? The festival business has exploded in the past decade. I mean, there's literally a festival everywhere happening at the same time. But they seem to be very heavy in electronic music right now. General festivals, maybe in the United States, have not expanded into other genres.
There are a lot.
And so my question
There
to
are
you
a lot.
guys is, do you guys focus on specific genres, or do you feel that there are some genres that are underserved? You know, like country music festivals.
We just had one. We had iHeartMedia Country Music Festival.
There you go.
In Austin.
Awesome. And you were talking earlier. We were all talking. You mentioned that you guys were going to Camp Disco.
Yeah.
And before that, you were at a jam band style festival.
Well, those are almost similar. Right? Disco can kind of go cross genre, but it's still, you know, 3 nights of disco. Biscuits playing 4-hour sets, so it is still got a lot of jam band like feel to it. But like as a creative director, that's one of my most important goals, is to not be pigeonholed as a EDM network.
Yeah.
We are a music festival network, and and this is something that you and I have talked about in DJing. I like being able to give people what they want and then introduce them to something new. And you keep them there with what they want, and you sneak in the something new. I like being able to take them to like a bluegrass festival or Moog Festival in North Carolina. It's very cross genre, but it's all based around the Moog instrument and happens like right outside the factories. And that's a really cool, interesting thing.
I saw one of the guys from Sydney Mobile Disco
Yeah.
jamming on some of the synthesizers, and it was just like this big room. That was playing.
Unbelievable. It's insane, and that's what my job is okay. We just did Miami Music Week. That's all EDM all the time, but we try to keep it diverse. We'll talk to some house guys, we'll talk to some disco guys, we'll talk to some mainstream type guys, but it's all electronic music. And then the next thing we did was Sweetwater 420 Fest, which was Trey Anastasio and Widespread Panic and Mo, and it was just jam band central. And then the next thing we were looking at, we ended up not doing content there, but we talked about Hangout, which was a very diverse, from 21 Pilots to Migos to Weezer and Franz Ferdinand, a very diverse festival, great lineup. Yeah. And then we got Bottle Rock this week. And the same weekend as Hangout, you had Rock on the Range, which was Metallica, and unfortunately Soundgarden was supposed to play there.
Too soon.
Yeah. There are festivals that are specifically for different genres. Riot Festival is fantastic for rock and roll. I think the big flash in the pan stuff is the EDM, because that's kind of the big thing right now.
Yeah.
It's oversaturated, in my opinion.
It absolutely is.
I think it's tough. I mean, look, what I'd say about that is it's driven to a certain extent by what people perceive to be youth culture, right? So EDM or dance music, generally speaking, has had a strong pull, and a lot of the innovation that you've seen in popular music has come out of the dance music genres, whether it's deep house or techno or any of those genres, right? They start in some far-flung place in Northern Europe or on the Playa at Burning Man, and
the next thing you know, they're producing for Kanye.
And the next thing you know, they're producing for Kanye, right? So I think that the festival business kind of got a bad name because of that oversaturation, and there were a lot of events that were poorly run because there was a rush to fill that gap.
Yeah.
But if you look at the guys who've been doing EDC for all those years, if you look at the guys who are down in Miami in the winter, if you look at Tomorrowland is a great example. I mean, those folks have been doing it for a very, very long time. They've got well-established brands. They know what they're doing.
They have their users' trust.
Yeah, they have there's a lot of trust there, and they understand how to put on real events, and to the point where they've been acquisition targets for really big companies.
Yeah.
For our point of view is we probably don't have brand permission at iHeart to go too deep down the rabbit hole of any particular genre, because what we do on the radio is really more a beacon for tribes, and when you're broadcasting, you really can't narrowcast. So Z100, for example, I know everyone here listens to Z100, right? Big Z100 crowd here today, right? Z100 is not defined by CHR or top 40 music. It's defined on, because that's a misnomer. That's after the fact. First you decide if it's a hit. A couple of years ago, Mumford & Sons was on Z100. Did anyone call them top 40 music? No. They had a hit. People liked it. It was a hit, right? And it's the same thing for Swedish House Mafia. Before Swedish House Mafia had those radio hits, nobody called them a radio act. Nobody thought of them as pop music, right? So it's sort of this ex post facto sort of look back and you go, oh, well, it's pop music, right? Well, you know, yeah, Britney Spears is pop music. No arguments there. You know, is Lemonade by Beyonce pop music? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. That's pretty, you know, she really took a lot of creative risks on that record. So, you know, what we're looking at is we're looking at the, you know, the genres and the formats that have really, really broad reach, and then we'll throw in some stuff in there. We love to showcase new artists. We have a theater down in Tribeca. A lot of people don't know that. We do closed set shows, and we have had everyone there. Like in 2009, we opened our first act was Green Day. So imagine seeing Green Day in front of 200 people, which was magic. But we also had Robin, and we also had Phoenix, and we've also had Interpol, and we've also had Ryan Adams just 2 weeks ago. So it's really like, it takes all kinds. But when you put on a festival, the goal obviously is to attract a large number of folks. And for us, it's about brand permission, right? If we did a deep house festival, nobody would take it seriously. Because we don't have brand permission to play in that space. But the music festival that we do every year in Vegas is really broad, right? And you know, yeah, there's alt rock, and yeah, there's pop, and yeah, there's R&B and hip hop, and a little bit of everything. But the thing that ties it all together is there are acts that have broad reach and broad appeal.
Do you separate the genres by stage?
No, we do it at the MGM Grand, and there's only two stages. There's the or not anymore, actually, it's T-Mobile Center now. The T-Mobile Center is the main stage Friday and Saturday, and then we have a daytime festival where it's a lot of emerging acts, and it's always multiple genres. And what the artists tell us is they love watching the other, like, you know, the country star loves watching, the pop star loves watching, the, you know, I mean, like last year we had everybody from Tears for Fears as a throwback.
Wow.
I mean, just, and then, you know, the biggest pop stars on planet Earth, you know, the Kanye's, the Coldplay's.
And one of the best things about that is it's so interesting when you're at a festival like that to see, because you don't get as much like crossover. This was at a different festival, like multiple stages. Cloak and Flap in Hong Kong was.
What's it called?
Cloak and Flap.
Cloak and Flap?
Yeah.
Everybody.
It's
Take it down.
honestly,
Take it
it's like one of the best festivals I've ever been to. It's right on Victoria Harbor in Hong Kong. Unbelievable views of the skyline. And the headliners in 2015 were the Libertines one night, Chic with Nile Rodgers the second night, and New Order the third night.
It's amazing.
So you have ridiculously diverse artists, and you know, early in the day they've got like J-pop and K-pop, and,
Right.
and then like Nouvelle Vague played,
Wow.
So to see the crowd not really change over, maybe go get a beer, but come right back to the main stage and be like, I don't know what I'm listening to, but it's fantastic.
That's why festivals
what's
are so.
nice
That's
about
why
it.
festivals are magic, right?
Yeah.
And that's why, in my opinion, it's great. We did this in November. We did something called Fiesta Latina down at the American Airlines Arena in Miami, and it wasn't about any particular strain of Latin music. It was everything. So you had Juanes, who's really more about like a rock crooner guy, and then you had J Balvin, and then you had, you know, like the guys who were doing real straightforward reggaeton. You had guys from the Dominican Republic who were doing more bachata. And in its own way, it was just as diverse. It was just for the, you know, for the sort of Hispanic-speaking,
Right.
you know, and you know, Miami is in some ways sort of the capital of Latin America. So that was in its own way just as diverse and interesting and fascinating and as much of an education. And the people who came there, they probably came from one or two of the acts on the bill, right? But then they were won over by all the other acts. So it was a great, I think it was a great indication of how much diversity is possible within the festival experience.
So the next 5 years, what do you guys think is going to happen within this industry? Like you guys are saying, there's a lot of genre diversity. Like, do you think the technology is going to change that? Do you think that people, like you said, are more open-minded to hearing about, you know, nascent genres and artists at these festivals?
I think you've always got, there's always a pop culture and a subculture, always. There always will be. And there will always be people, I say there are people that listen to music, and then there's people that just hear it. in my opinion, that's the difference between the pop culture and the subculture. And that's always going to exist. The genres may flip completely. You'll have subcultures of like PC music was totally weird pop, but it was like this subculture.
PC, like, what was an acronym or? Just for
No. It was PC as in I think just
Like
personal.
correct?
No, I think it's personal computer.
Personal computer. Okay.
It was just this weird. It was so short-lived, but it sounded like pop music, but on mescaline. Like it was really.
Like 8-bit.
Are you talking like
It was
Sophie?
really weird. I'll play some stuff for you. Maybe we'll put it up on the.
Yeah,
Come
we'll
on.
just play it afterwards.
Yeah, we want
But that was pop music, but it was a subculture thing that happened and never broke through to the mainstream, and that will always exist. And you're always going to have, the difference being, not everybody's going to be Coachella. Not every festival is going to be Bonnaroo.
And that's okay.
No, that's great. It's beautiful because you go there for that festival, and it's its own thing. But then you can also go to Oasis Festival in Marrakesh that a friend of mine puts on that is just really nerdy, crafted techno and house, like very specific genre. It is not trying to be a huge festival. It is trying to be a niche, you know, and that's always going to exist. And I think it's fantastic that there are music festivals for everyone. On every corner of the globe. You can make it a weekend in Pennsylvania, or you can do a week in Southeast Asia centered around a festival. And they can be identical musically or further apart than they are like physically. And I think that's beautiful, and I think that's just going to continue to develop. I think what's going to change is a lot of the festivals that have sprung up that are not dedicated to a certain kind of music or to a certain idea or ideal, they're going to start to die out. You've had the explosion, and now it's going to kind of refine itself.
So the bubble popping.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my take on this is that festival culture and festivals as an expression of music fandom is only going to grow in importance because in every other way we are so disintermediated by technology. So think about the cultural activity of record shopping, right? I grew up coming into the city, shopping at St. Mark's Sound, Bleecker Bob's, Tower Records on 4th Street, and many, many, many other record stores, too many to mention. Later, Other Music, Rebel. May they all rest in peace. They are all gone without exception. And you know, before I went to that CBGB's matinee, before I went to Save the Robots, before I went to you know, the Pyramid, there was a record shop thing that happened on that weekend day as a teenager. And it was, part of it was the socialization, socializing with other music fans, talking to the record store employees and the clerks, understanding what was out there, seeing the records I couldn't afford, like just the physical touching of like that whole thing was such a big part of my musical education, but more importantly than that, my identity, the growth and the development of my identity as a human being. And what do you have now? Now, trust me, I was an early proponent and worked on very early platforms around the celestial jukebox. That's what we used to call it 10 years ago. It was the idea that you'd have any music you want at your fingertips. Back then we were thinking about it on your computer, right? Now it's even better because it's on your phone. So we've gained access to incredible catalogs, although you still find a lot of stuff you can't find, which just drives me nuts. But what have we lost? We've lost the musical culture around this, you know,
Tangible.
you know, think about it. In the history of mankind, there was this 60, 70-year period in the history of humanity. And music has been part of the fabric of human life since we sort of climbed, you know, stood on 2 feet and developed culture and language, right? Music's been there the whole time. So of that entire, whatever it is, called a million years, 60, 70 years, there was a time when people collected these plastic items, called them records, called them CDs, called them tapes, whatever they were, right? So it's a blip in history, but it's a blip in history that was meaningful for me and a lot of other people that I know, and that was part of their musical education. That's absolutely gone. What is left, right? Because even the small clubs in a lot of cities can't make ends meet. It's very hard in a city like New York to operate. Cabaret licenses are hard to come by. You know, there are venues that come and go. What's left? The place where you can commune, sort of have that musical fandom, that pure sense of connectivity, that pure sense of joy and expression and letting loose. It's music festival culture. It's the music festivals themselves. And they have to be well run, and that trust has to be there. But that's only going to become more important, because in every other way, you know, the irony of Facebook being you're connected to all your friends and yet you've never been more isolated. So what is the antidote to that? Real human contact at festivals, right? That is the most pure expression of music fandom. So I think that that's incredibly critical. And the other thing I just wanted to say, because I'm a guy who comes out of an alternative music scene, really more punk and hardcore than dance music, although I came to dance music later, is that when I first started working at what was then called Clear Channel, I was extremely dismissive as the digital guy of pop music fandom, because I didn't think it was a pure or real fandom. What I've learned, which has humbled me, and it's absolutely true in my opinion, is that the people who love Pink and who love Britney Spears, right, and who love, name any one of these acts that we might dismiss as bubblegum or insubstantial or anti-intellectual, it's all bullshit. The people who love those acts love them as deeply as you love Monkey Safari. I don't know that you love Monkey Safari. That was a cheap crack. It was a cheap crack. Love them as much as, an EDM kid loves, Dead Mouse and, or Cascade or any of those other great acts. And that expression of fandom is as pure and real and authentic as any subculture, and we dismiss those people at our peril because they represent music fandom just as much as we do. And there should be festivals that speak to, think about what just happened in Manchester.
Yeah.
That's Ariana Grande. There were people who were tripping over themselves to make fun of her music while there were dead kids, right? Think about how stupid that was. Because your mind immediately goes to, well, that's bubblegum, that's disposable. But when you, and I know, I've been at a lot of shows where we've had Ariana Grande, when you see those girls light up, or women, or men, when she comes on stage and she kills it, she's a pint-sized diva and can sing like multi-octave ranges and so on, I don't have to like it to recognize the purity of the fandom, the authenticity of that, of the pureness of heart that comes from just getting something emotionally, like the emotional sustenance that you derive from seeing your favorite artist. And that is why this business will only continue to grow and flourish if it's handled with that love and respect, right? And what all things you're talking about, right? The ones that are not going to survive are the ones that don't know how to do it right.
Right.
Like Fire Festival.
Oh, yeah.
Had to go there. So with that, thanks guys. I want to open it up to the audience. If you guys have any questions, this is the time to ask. So, anyone?
Oh, surely someone has.
Everyone just waits until after. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. And Owen, thank you so much. We're gonna have some music. We're gonna hang out. There's drinks, and thank you again to Blender Workspace for hosting this event. Scott's right here, and also the other owner. Guys.
Thank you.
Bar is open, so please go up to them and talk to them about the space. You can host your company here. You can do events just like we did right here. It's a beautiful space, and it's on 135 Madison Avenue, correct? So check out blenderworkspace.com and subdrive.net. This video will be live on Facebook and on YouTube right after this. So thank you so much. So yes,
Pre-roll, post-roll, prematurely.